Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining another live stream Own Your Judaism conversation. My guest today is Mark Vandroff. And for anyone listening and watching, buckle up because he has quite a bio and a resume. Just from him and me talking about his bio, I have already learned so many new things. Mark Vandroff is the Chief Executive Officer of Fincantieri Marinette Marine, FMM. In this position, Mark is responsible for the full range of business and industrial operations at FMM. FMM is a leader in military ship construction and currently has 3 different classes of warships under construction for both the U.S. Navy and the Royal Saudi Navy. Prior to this assignment, Mark was the Senior Vice President of Business Development at Fincantieri Marine Group, USA. Prior to joining Fincantieri, Mark served as the Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Defense Policy on the National Security Council staff at the White House. In this role, he served as the President's Senior White House Advisor on a broad array of matters, including defense capabilities, irregular and non-traditional warfare, strategic weapons, international security cooperation, military personnel, emerging defense technology, and space security. Prior to his time at the White House, Mark worked at Zenetex, LLC, as Vice President of Maritime Programs. Before his civilian career, Mark served in the U.S. Navy, retiring from active duty with the rank of captain. His command-level tours included service as the Major Program Manager for Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and Commanding Officer of Naval Surface Warfare Center in Carteret, Maryland. He holds a BS in Physics from the Naval Institute, the Strategy Bridge, and the Center for International Maritime Security. He has appeared on many national security-related podcasts, including Midrats, Acquisition Talk, Preble Hall, and the Joint Geeks of Staff. He was awarded the Secretary of Defense Outstanding Public Service Award and the 2018 Gold Medal for Engineering Excellence by the American Society of Naval Engineers. Mark, it is so great to have you. Thank you for joining. We've only met in person 2 or 3 times. Mark lives in the Baltimore area out on the East Coast. Bethesda, thank you. Bethesda area out on the East Coast. I am the rabbi of a synagogue in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's a part-time job. I'm there 2 Shabbatot, 2 Sabbaths a month. I live in Milwaukee normally. And Mark is now spending a good chunk of time in the greater Green Bay area for work. So he came to the synagogue. We've met a couple of times. And I have just heard some, I am sure, just some of your incredible stories. And I thought this would be a wonderful conversation to have. So Mark, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi, for having me here. I'm really looking forward to this. I always enjoy the opportunity to talk about my Jewish experience, what Judaism has meant to me, and how Judaism has affected my life.
Wonderful. You know, I imagine we could be here for hours and hours and you'd still hit like the proverbial tip of the iceberg of, actually, I just realized, I don't know if that's a bad cliche to use.
It is an interesting cliche, right?
Yeah, I just realized we were talking
who's a career sailor, right?
Tip of the iceberg is a bad cliche, but we'll just be starting. So let's get right into it. So tell me a little bit, Mark, about your Jewish journey, please.
So I grew up. It's interesting. I grew up in what some would call a 1-horse town, but what was certainly a 1-synagogue town. Lakeland, Florida, which for those who are not intimately familiar with the geography of Florida, is halfway between Tampa and Orlando. And I grew up there and my formative years, I graduated from high school in 1985. So the 70s and 80s were my time growing up. One small conservative synagogue in the city of Lakeland, about 200 families, middle of the Bible Belt. Now, the I-4 corridor has changed. There's been a lot of migration. So now it's a much more cosmopolitan area. But in the 70s, that strip between Tampa and Orlando was the Deep South. And that I think affected me in ways that I look back and that have been positive. But when I would go to USY conventions, when I would participate in Jewish things, the kids from Miami, they grew up in a Jewish environment. They were used to having lots of Jewish, either going to a Jewish day school or being in a school with lots of other Jewish kids. In a graduating class of 650 students at Lakeland High School, I was one of 3 Jewish kids in my class. And for Lakeland High School, that was a lot to have 3 in one class. It made me realize that I was a minority, and it colored my outlook. But it also made me very proud to be Jewish, and I treasured the opportunities to experience my Judaism even from an early age because of that, because I felt it was both different and special, and I wanted it to make an impact on my life. And then during my 30 years in the Navy, I had a wide variety of Jewish opportunities because I would get stationed in some places like Norfolk, Virginia, which has a nice Jewish community, small, but there are several synagogues within the greater Norfolk area, active. If you wanted to daven at something at Orthodox, conservative, or Reform, you could find something to fit your needs. I was stationed several times in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And of course, there you have a large and vibrant Jewish community with a JCC and lots of choices and synagogues. And then I did tours in a place like Pascagoula, Mississippi, where again, there was no synagogue. I might have been, for all I know, the only Jew in town. And if I wanted to go to a service, my choice was to get in my car and drive 60 miles one direction to Mobile or 80 miles to New Orleans in the other direction, because those were the 2 closest synagogues. And you had to find ways to be Jewish by yourself, which I will say, especially now that I have a family, but even when I was single, one of the things I learned is it's hard to be Jewish by yourself. Judaism requires a Jewish community. I mean, from PK Avot, they were wise to say, do not separate yourself from the community. You can daven by yourself, but you really can't experience the fullness of Judaism alone. It takes a Jewish community.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, I feel the same way about Judaism in general, right? Like, Judaism is a communal religion. And certainly we have individual relationships with other people, with God, with the world, with the people in our lives. But ultimately, it's a communal religion. We know that from the necessity of a minyan, a quorum of 10 adults for certain rituals, for certain prayers. So, so thank you. Thank you. Bob Dick, who you might remember, you might have met Bob, I think, at the synagogue in Green Bay. His wife, Rabbi Shana Bacharach, is the Rabbi Emeritus of the synagogue. So Bob just shared on Facebook that you should discuss being Jewish in Mississippi with Rabbi Shana. So next time you're in Green Bay,
next time I will.
Or next time I'll just have the 2 of you on here. I'll take myself off screen entirely, and I'll just be a guest, and I'll just hear the 2 of you talk about Jewish life in Mississippi. So Bob, thank you for adding that in. By the way, for anyone who's participating, who's watching live on Facebook, you can comment, you can ask questions, and I will be able to see them live. So thank you for sharing that. As you were talking, you were talking about different synagogues and different areas you've been. You were talking about how you've been in small Jewish communities, large Jewish communities. And I remember one thing you shared with me. It might have even been the first Shabbat that we met. And I hope I'm paraphrasing this correctly, that you got to pride yourself on being able to navigate services in any synagogue.
Yes. So
it doesn't mean that you love services in every synagogue, which is okay, but you pride yourself on being able to navigate services. So that always struck me.
Right. So that I do pride myself on being able to navigate services in any of the denominations. I think that comes from my family experience. So I have my sister is a member of a Reformed synagogue and her family in Atlanta. And I have cousins in Jacksonville and Miami who are Orthodox. And obviously I will attend the various simchas and when I visit, attend services with, all my different relatives in the different synagogues that they are in. And from that, and just from my own personal education and wanting to be a reasonably well-educated Jew, I know what the traditions are in the different major American movements. And I understand what's in their liturgy and what's not. And I pride myself that I can walk into any synagogue, hopefully in the world, but certainly in America, and at least follow the service and be able to know what's going on, even if there's the quickness of a Orthodox Azan going through beginning line, last line, next page, beginning line, last line, next page. At my synagogue in Bethesda, or actually the synagogue is in Potomac, I should be more accurate. It's just across the next town over. But at Congregation B'nai Tzedek, we go in for, if we're going to do a prayer, we're going to do it right. We may not do every psalm during Sukkot Zimra, but if we're going to do a psalm, the cantor's going to chant it. There's going to be a beautiful melody. We're going to go all the way through, and it's going to be an experience. And we might not do everyone every week, but we'll take the time to make that or Nishmat special. And then you get a more abbreviated service these days in a Reform synagogue. You don't get Musaf. You get a pretty abbreviated Sukkot Zimra, and that's every synagogue is going to find their own comfort level. But if someone leaves something out, I'm not going to get lost in the prayer book. I'm going to I know where I can follow along. I know where to go, and I pride myself on that because my family is spread out across all the different denominations, and I want to be able to daven with any of my family members when I'm with them.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. You talk about Judaism as a communal religion. So this is the proverbial walking the walk, right? That if Judaism is really about community, then it's not. Then communities are different, right?
Communities are different, right? But that gets back into the ability to find a community that you love, right? That's or that you want to be part of, or if you can't find it, building the community that you wanted to build. So that's anyway. So
well, that's a great transition question. So talking about your time in the Navy, you mentioned sometimes building community if you can't necessarily find it. So what was your experience finding community, building community? How did you live and be Jewish through your time in the Navy? And I know that's a long question because you have 30 years of naval.
I've got 30 years, and it would start at the Naval Academy, and I was pretty fortunate. The year I started at the Naval Academy was the first year the Navy stationed a Jewish member of the Navy's chaplain corps at the Naval Academy full time. So the Naval Academy normally has 6 chaplains. So there's 6 commissioned officers who are ordained clergy, and pastoral care is their full-time mission. And there's probably, maybe 700, 750 chaplains on active duty at any one time in the United States Navy. And then other services will also have their chaplains, the Air Force and the Army, and then, in the reserve component as well as active duty. So 6 chaplains on active duty at the Naval Academy at any one time. The Navy had not stationed a Jewish chaplain there ever until I showed up in 1985 as a plebe, what at a normal university would be called a freshman, what at a military school is called a plebe, a first-year student. And Rabbi Norman Auerbach of blessed memory, wonderful man. He was the first Jewish chaplain to be stationed there at the Naval Academy. And it was a big step for the chaplain community because they always wanted to have a Jewish chaplain in the 6th Fleet, which is the Mediterranean area of operations. And then there aren't that many rabbis on active duty. It's fluctuated somewhere between 5 and 10 during my career in the United States Navy as chaplains. And they wanted to try and keep them at the big fleet concentration areas. So Norfolk, very large fleet concentration. San Diego, very large. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, very large base. So those 3, they always tried to keep a rabbi close to that. Plus, then the rabbis had to do, you couldn't just rotate them around the major fleet concentrations, that small number of rabbis, because they had their own professional development. An officer who's a chaplain of any religious denomination would want to do a Pentagon tour doing religious policy. There's a small staff that does that religion, in order to the policy of how to facilitate religious observance among the greatest number of sailors. U.S. combatant commands, joint jobs. Every major U.S. combatant command, European command, or Central Command will have 2 or 3 command chaplains on the staff there, and those are considered prestigious positions for chaplains and lead to promotion. So you couldn't just pigeonhole the rabbis, or they wouldn't have the room for their own professional growth as chaplains. But the Naval Academy, or the Navy, made a commitment starting in 1985 and has kept it to keep a chaplain at the Naval Academy, both for the growing number of Jewish midshipmen, but also in order for non-Jewish midshipmen, the rest of them, to be exposed to both Judaism, and I would say the chaplain there is also kind of the expert on what I would call minority religions. So the rabbi there tends to look after Jews, Muslims, Eastern religions,
Oh, wow.
Latter-day Saints. He tends to be whoever that rabbi is, tends to be the advocate for midshipmen who come from minority religious backgrounds, whether that's Judaism or another religious minority, to make sure that their needs are getting met one way or another. And so I was lucky. I had a wonderful rabbi and a small but vibrant community. There were probably 10 or 12 other Jewish midshipmen in my class, and so maybe 25 to 30 Jewish midshipmen at the academy on time. So we would usually be able to make minions on Friday night and Saturday morning, and the Naval Academy gave us a place to hold services, and we had an organization in order to do social and cultural activities that's grown over time. So that part was good. It gets harder when you're one of 2 Jewish sailors on a ship of 250, 300 sailors, and you're out at sea for prolonged periods of time. I mean, you have no hope of getting a minion. You're basically, if you want to daven, you're davening by yourself. If you want to try and keep kosher, you have no chance of keeping kosher. You cannot, because you'll never get kosher dishes on a Navy ship. But you can do other things if you wanted to keep kosher. You can. It was interesting. This was a conversation I actually had with a Chabad rabbi, and I really respected what this rabbi said. I was at a conference, and I was talking to a Chabad rabbi, and we were talking about the subject of kashrut, because he was an Air Force chaplain, and in the Air Force, you can kind of, okay, we'll have paper plates, and and bring in, you're on land, we'll bring in kosher food, we'll serve them on paper plates. You could up the level of observance to something that a Chabad rabbi would be comfortable with during his tour at an Air Force base, especially stateside. And we talked about, well, what do you do on a ship when if for that night, I said, okay, on the night that they have pork chops, I'm just going to go to the salad bar, right? That's my choice there. That's about the best that can be done. And he looked at me and said, well, that's better than nothing. That is what he said. And I thought that was a great outlook to have. That's better than nothing, right? And that's actually an interesting one for someone who's got from the Orthodox perspective. But I thought that was very in line with what I've responded to, and most of the rabbis that have been in my life, and certainly the conservative movement, which has always been, pick what you're going to do and do it well when it comes to ritual and mitzvot, and then don't stand still. Try and incorporate more in your life as you can incorporate more in your life, so you have a growth experience, realizing that most conservative Jews aren't going to be scrupulous in every mitzvot that they keep. But it's important to be at least scrupulous about some, so that you have that element of ritual in your life.
Yeah. So a mitzvah, by the way, is a commandment, and it's a great life motto, right? If you're going to do something, try to do it well. Right. You're not going to do everything. You're certainly not going to do everything well. And when you choose to do something, put your best effort into it. And I appreciate how you're measuring, your commitment to Judaism through what you're putting into it, through the effort you're putting into it, to making it the best that you can in a pretty extreme context for most of us, right? Most of us aren't going to be spending months on a ship, right? So yeah, it's a beautiful life lesson beyond just a Jewish lesson. So Bob actually jumps in with a question here, if I may.
Sure.
He says, Mark seems to have developed the ability to separate politics, religion, and duty. And then in parentheses, duty refers to God, to the US, keeping each in its own lane. How do you do that? He then follows up, and you don't have to dive into the second part of the question. And so he says, how do you do that? And why does it seem so damned hard for most of us to do it? So
I don't know that I do that as well as Bob thinks I do, but
you just talk a good show.
But I will say this, getting back to what Judaism taught me, and one of the advantages of Judaism, and one of the things. So Judaism has, or should have, and I'm sure that there will be some Jews who would want to have a debate with me, because hey, it's Judaism. We want to have a debate about everything.
Two Jews.
It's the Jewish thing to do. But our sense of right and wrong, and our sense of ethics has a source, right? We don't get it from our own brain or our own heart. If I want to know what's right or wrong, I need to reflect upon what it says in the Torah, right? I need to reflect upon that revelation, because that's a standard for understanding, am I engaged in right or wrong? If you live your life with the idea that there's a standard, it's mentally easier. And this is one of the things I've talked to groups a few times about, why I believe Judaism made me a better naval officer, not just a better person, but specifically a better naval officer. And one of those is that, well, two. One is I'm comfortable with ritual, and I'm comfortable seeing ritual as a path to proper conduct. That if you do ritual correctly, it's a reinforcing mechanism for your correct and ethical conduct. But I'm also very comfortable with the idea that I don't get to decide right and wrong for myself, that there's external standards. So as you know, in my military career, I had external standards of right and wrong. I mean, I had, there were rules, there were guidelines, there were laws that determined what was right and wrong. And when I joined the Navy, I embraced that those laws would become part of me. I would embrace that those laws would be what I followed, and that those standards would be my standards, and that it wasn't something that I was coming up with from inside me. It was something that I was taking on from outside me and bringing to me. And I think that's the way I approach Judaism, is that I take my ethics not from what I think is right inside, but from an external standard that has been articulated as right and wrong. And that my job is to reflect, study, and understand that standard, so I make it part of me, rather than try and take something that comes from me and put it external. I have an external standard of right and wrong. And I think that having that, to the extent that I've been successful across both my personal life and my religious life and my various professional lives, it's because I look to those external standards of right and wrong.
Wow. As you were talking, I couldn't help but hear the refrain in my head from Ruth, right? So Ruth is the story that comes at the end of the Tanakh, and it's what we read on Shavuot, which typically happens end of May, middle of May, early June. And Ruth, according to Judaism, is considered the model Jew by choice, right? She was not born a Jew. And when she is essentially affirming her life as a Jew, she basically says, your God is my God, your people, my people, your this, my this. And I don't know if you were intentionally doing that, but I heard echoes of that, essentially saying your standard is my standard, right? The Jewish standard, the Navy standard, right? I'm choosing. And it's a powerful reminder that whether you're a Jew by choice or whether you're born Jewish, Judaism is always a constant choice, right? Right? I mean, I was born Jewish. I'm a rabbi. I can still choose to do Judaism or choose not to do Judaism. So it's always a constant choice.
It is in America today. Historically, it's not been. Now that the Ruth conversion is certainly more accurate about my relationship to the Navy than it is to Judaism. That's something that I embraced by choice, by free choice. I mean, I was born Jewish and I was raised Jewish. So it's, it would be an interesting question of what do I come by this by choice, or is this because, it was what I was exposed to in my developmental years. But historically, being Jewish was not a choice, right? I mean, if in the ages of places where Jews were forced to live in shtetls, and there was different experiences both among Ashkenazi and Mizrahi in different parts of the world at different times. Most of the history of Jews in the diaspora has not been the American experience. I mean, for better and sometimes for worse, a Jew here. The good news in the United States of America is that a Jew is free to be as Jewish as he or she wants to, and live Judaism in a way that they want to live it. The bad news is they're also free to ignore it. A Jew today is absolutely free to ignore their Judaism, to discard it and let it have no impact on their life.
Well, that's not new either. That's not new.
Excuse me?
That's
Right.
not new either, right?
Well, I mean, but for someone born in the shtetl, they were kind of stuck, right? There was no place to go. They were stuck in that life. Today in America, Jews aren't stuck, right? You can embrace your Judaism. You can ignore your Judaism. You can find whatever midpoint that a person is comfortable with. But to be Jewish today is absolutely a choice. That is, in America today, it truly is.
Thank you. And Bob thanks you for your answer. And he also quips that some would say that the Navy is ruthless.
So I'll not respond to that.
Very smart. Right. Keeping the things separated, right? The politics and the religion. So tell me a little bit, if it's from time in the Navy, from your time in the White House, if you want to actually, share a little bit, please, if you're comfortable, what you did in the White House.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, what touched me, I had a unique opportunity during 2020 when a longtime and dear friend of mine, Ambassador Robert O'Brien, was picked by the president to serve as national security advisor. After Ambassador Bolton left from that position, Ambassador O'Brien had been serving at the State Department, and President Trump selected him to be the national security advisor. And after a few months, I got a call from Ambassador O'Brien asking me to join his team there at the White House to run the defense policy shop on the National Security Council. And I was very honored that he offered me that opportunity, and it was a unique opportunity. Certainly, and I've talked about this, I mean, from a Jewish perspective, it was incredibly meaningful to me and emotional to get to work on the Abraham Accords. It was also incredibly stressful. Shortly after I started at the Naval Academy, shortly after I started at the National Security Council, off by 3 decades there. Shortly after I started at the National Security Council, Ambassador O'Brien scheduled for me to meet Jared Kushner and Avi Berkowitz, who had been working a variety of Middle East initiatives. It looked like we could get one or more Mideast countries in the Gulf region to recognize the state of Israel and normalize relations. Avi Berkowitz, just a tremendous young man, doesn't get enough credit for what a natural diplomat he is. Was working with the ambassadors Ambassador Dermer from Israel and Ambassador Al-Otaibi from the UAE. They needed someone to work the mill-to-mill relationships, the military-military relationships between Israel and the UAE. So, and between the two ministries of defense as part of this. And so they needed someone with a Pentagon background, and then later some of my colleagues got involved in that. I spoke at my synagogue about that extensively, and I was just, when I found out about it, I was stunned that these negotiations had started. I was excited, and then I was a little terrified that they wouldn't work out. And so along the course of the summer, and this was the summer of COVID, which made it much more difficult. But we had meetings and meetings with the Israelis, meetings with the Emiratis, trying to get them to a place where both sides would agree on the recognition. During this time, because of COVID, my wife and daughter actually spent a considerable amount of time in with where my family is from, in the Jacksonville, Florida area, where they've settled. That's where my parents moved after my dad sold his business in Lakeland. But my sister and her husband have a vacation home in the Jacksonville area. They weren't using it. They let my wife and my daughter use it over that summer in order to get out of town. And so my wife jokes, she would call me every night to see how things were going at the White House. Says, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, just trying to have world peace." and so right after they get back was when, and the anniversary is coming up here in just a few days, but we had the August 13th call. So that whole month of July, we were and I was by myself. I was, my family was down in Florida. I was there in DC, and then traveling, trying to get this done amongst the other things that I was doing. And so certainly as a Jew who cares about the state of Israel, being part of that, and I was by no stretch of the imagination a big part. A tremendous amount of credit for that has to go to Jared and to Avi. And then we had another team member of mine that we were just so darn lucky. We had a 2-star Army general by the name of Miguel Carrera, who had been detailed to the White House to be part of the National Security Council staff, which is very common. Each of the services lends a certain number of active duty officers to staff the political appointees in the White House on the National Security Council. But General Carrera had been our defense attaché in Abu Dhabi the year before. So he knew everyone amongst the Emiratis. He was so well respected and so well connected to their Ministry of Defense and to their royal family. He was so key to that, and getting to work with him was such a privilege. But in the end, when we got that call, the first anniversary coming up here in I think it's going to be Friday is the anniversary. But to get that call, to be in the Oval Office when we got the Crown Prince MBZ, the call from him that he was going to recognize the state of Israel, that just meant the world to me. That was an incredible experience. And so that was and then a few weeks later we got Bahrain, and we continued to make progress on that. So, but that I felt like I had contributed in my own little way, both to something that was going to be good for the United States of America, which I absolutely believe that the Abraham Accords, first and foremost, will benefit American security in that region, but also something that would benefit the state of Israel and its security as the homeland for the Jewish people. So,
wow. I've always wondered what it must have been to be a Jew in the late 1940s and hearing the live UN vote where Israel was formed as a country. And
I've seen the videos of it.
We've all seen the videos, and you got a little snippet, right? It's not quite the same thing, but you got a little snippet. You were there. Like, this is what you're talking about. When you heard, and you might have been among the very, very, very first in the world to hear that this was happening. And man, I can just imagine you in that picture now, just hearing this wonderful, remarkable news.
No, right. Right. It was right to be part of it. But what history doesn't record, at least for me, was how terrified I was the month before that this was all going to fall through. And we kept having to work both sides and get to an agreement. And then the Emiratis are very interesting. They have a government that I would say works for them, but for the outsiders looking in, they see it's a hereditary monarchy, and they think, okay, the monarch is large and in charge, and it's an absolute he gets to do whatever he wants. It's more participatory than it seems once you get to know that. The Emirates, each of the Emirates, it's a federal system. They don't like to make policy unless all 7 of the emirs are on board, and each of those emirs who come from the royal family of their different areas within the United Arab Emirates. There are prominent families within each of the Emirates for whom the royal family relies on for support and cooperation. And so it really is a consensus-driven society. Each of the individual emirs want to make sure that their leading families are comfortable with their policy decisions. It's much more informal than, we have elections to do that. We have very formal elections. They don't take polls. They don't have elections, and it's a smaller society. There's probably less than 1.5 million actual Emirati citizens.
Oh, wow.
The rest of the country of 10 million is expats from different countries. And so amongst that 1.5 million with lots of interrelationships and familiar relationships, they kind of, the leaders of those people will have a discussion. And especially for someone who's not familiar or was getting familiar, it can be, it could take a while to get, everybody who needs to say yes or to do it in a way that everyone is comfortable with. And that was just something that was interesting to learn. And of course, that was very different from dealing with the Israeli government, which is a democracy, but is also unlike the United States, where there's clear lines and separation of powers. You've got government and opposition, and then a government that's in coalition with other partners can be strong or it can be weak, and you could have even different parts within a governing coalition could all be plotting on what they're going to do at the next election, which presents its own set of challenges. Because when we were negotiating with the Netanyahu prime ministership at the time, the foreign minister and the defense ministry were in the hands of a coalition partner, in this case blue and white, whose political goals may or may not, in many cases, were not aligned with Likud. And that made for an interesting negotiation. We're trying to negotiate with one country, but the one country was really had a couple of different competing political interests with the different entities within that country that we were negotiating with. So both the Emiratis and the Israelis presented their own unique challenges in trying to come to the meeting of the minds that produced the Abraham Accords.
Wow, that's incredible. Thanks for sharing all that, Mark. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how either you brought your Judaism to any or all of your work, or what the interplay was between your Jewish life, how that impacted you, your work, or maybe they need to be kept separate for many reasons, and that's okay too.
No, I'm a firm believer in not keeping it separate. Both, and I've talked about this before, I alluded to it, but maybe I'll talk about it more specifically. I believe certainly in my naval career and also now in my career in industry, Judaism is supposed to make you a better person. And I believe that the Jewish values make me a better leader. I believe that the principles of ethics that are embodied in, for example, whether it's Jewish business practices and the laws concerning those, they're supposed to impact your life. And the example I gave, and I talk about this a lot. One of the mitzvot that I really enjoy and have come to really enjoy practicing is the laying of tefillin. I really get a lot out of in the morning before I start work or before what I do, putting on the tefillin, saying the Shema. For those who put on tefillin, they know that Yad goes first and Rosh goes second, and that you don't put on Shel Rosh before you put on Shel Yad. You put the arm tefillin on before you put the head tefillin on. And I remember talking to a group of Jewish high school students and saying, so what would be how bad would it be if you put on the head tefillin first, right? Would it really matter? And my point of saying that is that if you're going to have a ritual that's going to help remind you of your ethical obligations, that it's important to do it right, or else the reminder doesn't work. And I made the analogy to the Navy. There's a Navy ritual, just like putting on, as prescribed as putting on tefillin. There is a very definite way you come aboard a Navy ship. There's precise words you say when you come aboard. There's a precise order of who and what gets saluted. You salute the flag, you salute the watchstander, whether the officer or petty officer on watch, and there's a very formal set of words depending upon if you're there visiting or if it's your own ship and you're returning to your own ship that you're assigned. It's a little different in those two cases, but in any case, there is a prescribed ritual for coming aboard. Now, if you violated that ritual, the ship won't sink. Nothing will get hurt. You'll be a little embarrassed, and you might get yelled at and told to do it over. But doing that in a ritual manner reinforces the need for discipline in doing important things. And when that same ship that you're boarding, when it's time for that ship to get underway, the ship would have to start its own generator to make electric power and remove any shore power cables if you were taking electrical power from the shore. There's a series of steps for doing that, and if you do it wrong, you'll start a fire and you might kill someone, right? There's those, and so just like my tefillin reminds me that I have ethical obligations that come from God, that those I have to do right? I can't steal or hurt someone or curse someone that would belittle them and cause them mental anguish, because I'll do real damage there. If tomorrow morning when I wake up and in my apartment here in Marinette, I go to put on my tefillin and I forget and put on Shel Rosh before Shel Yad, no one is going to get hurt by that. I freely admit that, even though I don't intend to do that. But if I forget what the ethical principles of the Torah are, I could do damage, right? I mean, especially as a leader of a large organization, the most important thing a leader can do, in my mind, is to constantly remember that every one of us is created, B'Tselem Elohim. We're all created in God's image, and if you treat people that way, a notion that is deeply embedded in what I've gotten from Judaism, then that's the key to being a successful leader. People will respond to that. I mean, it's both morally right, but it's also the best practical leadership advice I could give anyone, is to treat everyone as if they were made in the image of God, just like you, because that'll get the best performance. It'll get the best results. That's how you build a cohesive, coherent team. And so the rituals that I perform remind me of those ethical obligations. In the Navy, all of our discipline and rituals and saluting and things that we do, they're there to remind us to do things with discipline, because by having discipline, you don't start a fire when you start up your generators. You don't have an accident at sea. You're ready to respond to the needs of combat if that comes. That discipline in the Navy, and that my willingness to embrace that comes from my Jewish values. Like I said, I believe that whatever success that I've had, either in the Navy or in business, has been enabled by the way that Judaism affects me.
Wow, that is really powerful. Yeah, I have a couple of streams going through my head. One is when we talk in the Torah about the precise ritual that the priests have to do when offering a sacrifice. Right. I mean, it is precise. And if they get it wrong, the consequence is that they're going to die.
Right. The sons of Aaron are killed for offering the strange fire in Leviticus.
Exactly. So, when we talk about having this discipline for all small things, it's because there's going to be a time when it's not a small thing, it's a big thing.
It's a big thing, right? And discipline is not something that you just turn on at a moment. It's like, today I will be disciplined about something. Right. You either live with discipline or you live carelessly. And people who live carelessly should not be around important things, right? Important things require a disciplined approach to it. I have that today in the shipyard that I run. I mean, there's, if there's a lot of things in this yard that can get people hurt and killed if they are done wrong or they are used wrong, that are necessary in the building of a ship. And that's why, we have to have a culture of discipline in order to maintain a safe and healthy environment. And, I can't speak to where anyone else gets that. I recommend it for everyone. But I believe that my Jewish upbringing and my Jewish outlook is a gift that makes that I respond to that, and I embrace that as part of the way that we're supposed to live.
Wow, and I'm kind of extending the analogy that that you talk about all these disciplines, especially for the big things. Not in the Navy world, but certainly in the Navy world too, but things that we can take away, because I don't really have to worry about, making sure that a Navy ship is set to sail in the sea, right? I don't have to worry about those things, but ethics is still a discipline, right? Day to day is a discipline. It's the ritual equivalent of offering a sacrifice to God, right? So that is the discipline.
At some point this week, I feel very confident in saying someone is going to do something that's going to make you mad, or cause you to feel contemptuous towards another person. That's just the nature of life. I'm quite sure that's
frustration. I work a lot on anger. Frustration that's the next thing to work on. Yes.
And so the question then is how are we going to process that? And with someone who has the discipline to process that in a proper and ethical way, isn't going to, cause damage. But I mean, people can, and I know I've made, I'm by no means holding myself out as a perfect exemplar, right? But I know this because I've both experienced it in both directions, as a receiving and unfortunately giving. You can do terrible, just on the interpersonal relations, you can do terrible damage to a person by being contemptuous, by disregarding them, by not by not treating them the way that the Torah would have us treat other human beings. And so, and that's everybody, right? Everyone will experience that in their lives, because we're all going to come in contact with other people. We're all going to have the temptation to steal. And, you might say, well, someone who steals something small, it's not that big of a deal. That becomes a very slippery slope, right? And that's, so we're all going to face that. And the discipline of a Jewish outlook on morality and ethics, backed up by rituals that remind us of those obligations. Another beautiful ritual that I like is the kissing of the fringes during the Vayomer, right? Because you've got a stand-in for all the mitzvot, right? And you're supposed to say, okay, I'm gonna these are gonna mean something to me as you kiss them during the reciting of the Vayomer. So again, if I don't kiss my fringes this Shabbat, I'm probably not going to go out and start pickpocketing people. But if you never did that, if you never used that as a method to stop and reflect on the fact that the laws of the Torah are supposed to mean something to you, then I don't know where you get your ethics from at that point. People will start making it up on their own, and that's good for a while, and that's bad in the long term. That's my biggest argument with fellow congregants at B'nai Tzedek during our study sessions, and the biggest dividing line there are some people who believe them by believing either themselves or people in general to be so naturally good that if we just listen and we just do the naturally good thing, it'll all work out, because we all really want to what's good for each other. It's like, that's an outlook on life, but that's not a Jewish outlook on life. I just say that's not a Jewish outlook. The Jewish outlook on life is is that, we all have, we might all have a Yetzer HaTov, but we all have a Yetzer Hara. We all have an evil inclination inside of us, and that's what we need the laws of the Torah for, is to help us keep that under control.
And to help us really explore and deepen our Yetzer HaTov, the good inclination. Yep. Right. Yep. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I don't want to let you go quite yet.
No, I'm good.
But first, I want to give a huge thank you for all of your thoughts and all of your wisdom, the life lessons in addition to your personal stories. I don't know if it is you were thinking about this conversation, if there was just a particular story that jumped in your head, and I realize I'm putting you on the spot, so I can vamp or stall for a few seconds if you want, but I don't know if there's just like a story or an anecdote or something that just kind of exemplifies the either the nexus or the tension between your Jewish life and your professional life, or if not, just any story that comes up. I love hearing you talk and tell.
Well, thanks. So I don't have, something that was absolutely kind of the a nexus like that. I did want to talk about the Abraham Accords, because I got to be involved with that, and that was one thing that the one thing and this was, you and I had talked about this, but so my reflection, I'll offer this up, and I've talked about this publicly. I actually have a devar that I gave at my synagogue back in Potomac a couple of years ago when I retired from the Navy, that kind of encapsulated how I looked on the relationship between my life as a Jew and my life in the Navy during that time. But it also, I've talked here about how Judaism has made me a better naval officer. There's a reflection then about how the Navy affected my Judaism.
Oh, please.
And I gave a devar about the word shamor. And so for those, if there's non-Jews listening, or those who think back to the Lahadodi that we say on Friday night, that opening of the first verse, Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad. So to shamor, whatever that means, and zachor, which is to remember, said in one voice, because the Decalogue, what's known in English as the Ten Commandments, you gave a very nice devar about why the Ten Commandments might not be the best name for that particular section of Exodus, and then repeated in Deuteronomy. They're not repeated identically the same. And the biggest difference is the verb used concerning Shabbat is zachor, which is translated as remember, because it means to remember in Exodus. And then when Moses repeats that in Deuteronomy, it's shamor. And the point of my devar is, well, who the hell knows what shamor means? Because it's not translated consistently in any two translations from Hebrew into English of Deuteronomy. And you can find it as to keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath. Art Scroll has my favorite, which is to safeguard the Sabbath, which is the Art Scroll Humash's translation. And so I gave a devar, and I really said that when you unpack it and you look at the way shamor is used and all of its cognates, so shomer and yismachu and shomrei in Yisrael, when you unpack all the different ways that it's used, in my mind, it really means to treat Shabbat as a watch, as a duty rotation, that it's something that we have a responsibility to, and therefore, and also to get something from. And like standing a watch on a ship, if a watchstander stands a good and attentive watch, the watchstander protects the ship, but then the ship will protect the watchstander only if the watch is properly stood. Mm-hmm. And so that sense of responsibility, whether to one's shipmates when one is standing a watch, or to the Jewish community when you do something like keeping Shabbat in a community, that it's mutually reinforcing. That we strengthen Shabbat, and then Shabbat strengthens us, in the same way on a ship, that if you take responsibility and you stand your watch really well, that you strengthen the ship, and in the turn, the ship strengthens you. And that's something that I learned that was kind of a confluence of both my my Judaism and my Navy career. And it probably influences the way I look at the taking on of responsibility in general. That when you have something that you need to be responsible for, whether that, in my case now, of running a business, or anything where you're taking on responsibility, that responsibility, you need to strengthen it, and it in turn will strengthen you. And I learned that and I reflect on that as a relationship that ideally a Jew should have with Shabbat, that it strengthens you and you strengthen it. So that's one kind of perspective there from my time in the Navy that I reflected on. And I will say, just again, to give one shout out to Congregation B'nai Tzedek there in Potomac, which I am extremely proud to be a member of. I think the fact that it offers members the opportunity to give devars during the summer months helps the members, because the reflecting on what the lessons of the Torah should be shouldn't just be an exercise for the clergy. It's wonderful to have great clergy and to hear their years of study and scholarship give us something from the Torah. And I've enjoyed the couple of devar that you gave when I visited in Green Bay, and I love the devar of my clergy back at B'nai Tzedek. But to have the congregants take on that responsibility from time to time helps in that it requires them to examine their own perspective of what their relationship to the Torah and what their relation to Judaism is, and put it into words. So that's a minhag, a tradition that I recommend to any synagogue that's looking for something like that, to occasionally have the congregants give a devar Torah, because it helps enrich the congregants' perspective on their Judaism.
Thank you. You know, I know I can speak for myself, and I feel confident speaking for anyone who is watching or listening, that you indeed are a shomer, a watcher of Judaism. That you've talked so much about how Judaism enriches you, and just from everyone listening here for about an hour now, it's clear that you are enriching Judaism and enriching all of us as well. So thank you for being a shomer of Judaism. Thank you for all of your stories, for your wisdom, and thank you very, very much for your time, Mark. I really appreciated you joining this conversation.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's been my pleasure. Absolutely.
You're welcome. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon, Mark. Have a wonderful afternoon and evening to everyone who is watching or listening.
Thank you.